Good morning. It was a speech that probably hit differently for different people. President Trump's State of the Union address Tuesday night was a record setter, I should say, in terms of length. It went 108 minutes. Many Democrats skipped it, instead participating in what they called the People's State of the Union rally on the National Mall. Here to talk about all of it is presidential historian Thomas Balcerski of Eastern Connecticut State University. Welcome back.
Thank you, Eric.
We've been having you come in and check in on things. In many ways, the spotlight on what's happening in Washington has never been brighter. And here we have President Trump making his first State of the Union of the second term, because he gave his address after being inaugurated last year. What did you make of it just generally? I want to play some clips from it.
Sure.
Before, generally, 108 minutes, what did you take away from it?
Well, I hope you have stamina, because it was the longest State of the Union in American history, and it featured so many different pieces to it. Guests, a lot of heart-stirring moments, actually. Medals of Honor were awarded. Really just, it was almost like an award show at time, but the policy message is what I think will be remembered as well, and what certainly in our politics today is the focus.
All right, let's take a look at the first clip. It sort of sums up the meaning of this. Let's take a look at what President Trump had to say early on.
Today, our border is secure, our spirit is restored, inflation is plummeting, incomes are rising fast, the roaring economy is roaring like never before, and our enemies are scared, our military and police are stacked, and America is respected again, perhaps like never before.
So that was the big summation by President Trump. And I said to you before we started, no president would go stand at that podium and say, ladies and gentlemen, the State of the Union, ooh, not too good. They always say it's strong. That's their job. But what did you make of that? Was that expected?
Yeah, I think the way the president spoke to Congress that night was expected. It projected strength. He highlighted signature policy achievements from his first year in office. And he also wanted to, I think, remind voters why Republicans should get another crack at the second half of his term. A lot of the messaging here was about thinking ahead to the midterm elections in the fall. And those issues that he won on in the last cycle, border security, working on the economy to try to lower costs and tax cuts, some of those things have already happened. The question sort of you might ask is what's ahead if the Republicans do continue to hold Congress? And I think the border security piece has been his major success, and he highlighted it over and over. In fact, when he did get into it with the Democrats, it really was over that issue of immigration and over the security of the American people. That was probably the thing that we will remember from this speech.
We talked about it at the beginning, 80 Democrats skipping the speech, attending an alternative speech happening on the National Mall. You saw in that clip heads turning and looking backwards at the beginning because there were some outbursts. We have a clip here, him addressing Democrats. Let's take a look at this.
Look, nobody stands up. These people are crazy, I'm telling you. They're crazy. Amazing. Incredible. Boy, oh boy. We're lucky we have a country. With people like this, Democrats are destroying our country, but we've stopped it just in the nick of time, didn't we?
So you see that direct confrontation from the president to the Democratic side of the aisle. Their outbursts were heard during that as well. Outbursts, a relatively new phenomenon. We've seen them on the Republican side of the aisle, Marjorie Taylor Greene famously, and others. That's something new in history. What do you make of him calling out the Democrats? Is the partisanship more bitter than ever, or is that more recency bias?
I think this is an interesting kind of moment where clapping for the president is now a litmus test for patriotism, whereas before we had a pattern where if the president's own party was in power, yes, they would certainly be clapping and doing standing ovations. But in prior State of the Unions, there were more, I'll call it, bipartisan unifying issues that you would see both sides of the aisle raise. And we saw it once or twice in the award show portion with the American USA hockey team coming in and other various award winners, medal winners. But when it came to policy, I don't think the Democrats were willing to clap for the president. The only time they really stood is when he was really egging them on in a way around their votes against his tax cuts from the prior year. But the Democrats took a very deliberate approach here to try to be almost a silent treatment And the provoking that the president had, it was, I thought, effective as a rhetorical tool. And actually, his sort of supporters see that as unpatriotic, that they weren't willing to clap for this particular issue. And that moment was in response to, again, a border security issue and in response to an immigration issue. So I think he was looking, almost trolling the Democrats. And the president has shown skill at that through the years. And I think, depending how you look at it, this is another moment for him to say, hey, my side is the only side that's worth voting for.
Now, I want to ask you about the Supreme Court. We have a clip, and hopefully Wendy can just play the clip, but with the sound down. And he's talking to the Supreme Court justices, and they're having to stand there and take it while he criticizes them, or sit there and take it. In this case, he was very upset with their tariff ruling. Was that notable to you as a historian, that here we have that clip as he's talking about how upset he is with them, and they're just standing there, John Roberts, no choice but to take it? Normal, okay?
I don't
notable?
think, well, again, the Supreme Court doesn't always show up in numbers. That's the first thing we'll say. There were 4 justices there. We don't really know why or how they choose to attend. It wasn't a political statement of any kind. But it just so happened, of the 4 justices there, 3 of them were on the majority side in that 6-3 decision that struck down the use of a particular
including
kind of...
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yes, including, and given that she's the one appointee that was there, that's probably the focus, is to what extent that damages the relationship between President Trump and Justice Barrett. But also now it could be said that there have been a few of these alignments where Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, has pulled over a conservative or two and aligned on different issues. So while some of us think, is it a Republican versus Democratic ruling? Not always. Sometimes there are other kinds of values that the justices will weigh in here. But what was also interesting is how the president doubled down on it and saying that the ruling did not affect his policies. He talked about almost realpolitik issues, that the certain negotiations he's done, but also other legal means. And if there's one sort of policy carrot that he gave us, is that he's going to find another way to make tariffs reality.
Now, he's the president, not a lawyer, but as a lawyer, looking at the judge who ruled against you and saying they were wrong, it's pretty gutsy stuff. Only 30 seconds left, Tom. I just want to ask you this. Where does this go from here? The midterms, is that what we're watching, real quick?
Yeah, I think so. In terms of, does this establish a kind of policy theme or a campaign theme? That's to be seen. The Republican primaries across different states are taking place in the next month or two. Will the president return to some of these themes in his campaigning? Will he campaign for certain candidates? And on the Democratic side, will they take the momentum from the response from Governor Spanberger and try to build their affordability platform in these midterms?
Well, it certainly is very interesting. I know you've educated me that Thomas Jefferson started delivering these in writing.
Right.
Thank goodness for our show that Woodrow Wilson said, that's it, we're going back to Congress. Right. And then eventually they ended up on TV. Thomas Balcerski, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll have you back again as we continue to check in on this.
Okay, thanks, Eric.